Hello everyone, this is CounterYolo, bringing you another video talking about Star Trek Online. And in today's video, I'm going to go over science tanking inside the game. I'm not really feeling the greatest today, so today's video is going to be basically as quick as possible. Hopefully y'all can enjoy it and you can get some good stuff out of it. I'm not going to be covering battle cloak tanking because I didn't have as much time to get prepped for this video. Because a lot of the prep time for this video was invested in doing that bonus video earlier on this week. So first off, for my character for my science taking videos, I'm going to be using my Romulan Republic female Romulan captain. That is a science captain inside the game. Technically, if you want to do complete canon with how the Romulan captains are actually supposed to be, this captain technically should be a KDF aligned Romulan captain, but well, the real thing is, especially with science tanking, if you do a Federation aligned Romulan captain, you're able to have access to basically every single strong science ship inside the game. So that is kind of the advantage there. Plus, Romulans get a full bridge officer crew of superior Romulan operatives, which is really nice. When it comes to Romulans themselves, their passive thing is that in space they get additional stealth and bonus damage when they exit their own cloak. On its own, especially for regular science tanking, that isn't really that much of an advantage. However, you still get the regular Romulan operative trait as an optional thing to put in your space traits, so that is still something. And then, of course, you still can have 5 superior Romulan operative bridge officers, which is pretty nice. For my battle cloak tanking video, what's really important there is that I have 2 very special superior Romulan operative bridge officers that are from the Delta Rising Gigantic pack. That have these 2 additional traits here for additional stuff whenever you decloak. But really, for this particular video, it's just 5 SROs is really all that's going to make any big difference overall. Here's all the traits that I'm using. There's just a list here with names and little pictures of every single one of them inside the game. Bulkhead Technician, every single captain is able to have that. Romulan Operative is one that Romulans are able to have. Particle Manipulator is one that you can get if you get your R&D for science up to level 15. Conservation of Energy is available to all science captains. And then these other 5 traits are off of the exchange. It's these ones that are really expensive. If you can afford one of these, get the positive feedback loop. A lot of this build revolves around this trait very heavily. Psychological Warfare, you can work around not having that, but this one you definitely need. The rest of this is pretty straightforward. Extra regen and exotic damage, which you both really want for a science tank. Repair Cruise is pretty nice as well for additional hull regen. Biotech Patch for additional bonus hull. So it is all pretty nice. When it comes to my starship traits, History will remember is a pretty obvious one to have on there for basically any tank inside the game. The weirdest ones that we have on here now as a science tank is improved nonlinear progression, along with a trait called Turtle that we have instead of shield overload, just because for science tanks it's just better because we're using nonlinear progression predominantly. So the big thing about nonlinear progression, by the way, any science captain in the game is basically going to have this starship trait because this is the starship trait that you get from investing in the temporal operative specialization, which by the way is the science one. So science captains, you're going to have this one. The reason why it's overlooked is because you have to go in reverse for 5 seconds before you start getting it. But this is very, very strong. Even for my tank inside the game, because this is extra hit points and shield regeneration per second. This isn't per 6 seconds like most shield regeneration. This is each second you're getting this amount. So what's 400 times 6 is what over 2,000 shield regeneration per 6 seconds. That is higher than most regenerative shield rates can do inside the game. So in almost all cases, you're basically doubling your shield regeneration by having and using this trait inside of a battle. So this is very, very important, especially for science ships where you have a very, very high amount of shields typically for science ships. Combine that with Turtle, that whenever you're at 25% or less throttle, including when you're going in reverse, you get a lot of stacking shield capacity and shield hardness. I talked about before that shield hardness is an insanely good category for shield resistance, and that it's a linear form of shield resistance. So this is all super good to shield resistance. And then additionally, beyond these three things, have an improved gravity well so that your gravity well has a 20-second reduction in its cooldown and a 20-second increased duration to it, so that you basically have your gravity well going the entire time. For the general reputation traits, I use automated programmatic conduits because enemies crit an insane amount now, and if you're a tank, you're going to basically have this going basically the entire time now. I also have chrono capacitor for additional bridge officer recharge speed. I was debating on using the two torpedo reputation traits, but consistently this just seemed to be better. And then I have auxiliary power defense and fortified hold just for a lot of additional maximum hit points overall. For my active reputation stuff, end-of-time entanglement, deploy sensor interface, biobinocular shield generator, airfrag detector, and cascade is typically your better ones to use for science. For duty officers, first off, because science tanking is mainly torpedoes and exotic damage, explosive expert is extremely good to help supplement some of your more of your consistent DPS drop off, because you have a lot more spike DPS than consistent DPS. This will help to force enemies to attack you even when you aren't doing a lot of DPS towards them. Combined with this explosive expert for space, 3 deflector officers to reduce recharge speeds, and then a projectile weapon officer to improve the recharge speeds of torpedoes. If I had a 6th duty officer slot unlocked, I would have another projectile weapon officer just like this one. My specializations is Miracle Worker primary and Temporal Operative secondary. The reason for this is because for Temporal Operative, if you actually look really close into the skill stuff in the like tier 3 and tier 4 stuff for Temporal Operative, everything there basically is either dealing with energy weapons, which as a science tank you're not going to have them basically, and then the tier 4 stuff deals with stuff that doesn't trigger if you have threatening stance on, so it's not worth it. It's not worthwhile at all to have it as a tank. So having Temporal as a secondary, you lose nothing, and you're able to gain a lot from Miracle Workers. So this is what I highly recommend if you're going to be a science tank in the game. Here is my skill tree itself. A couple of screenshots there to kind of show all that. It is quite a bit different than what my other tank specials or skill trees are. This is still partially in the works. I'm still refining it. Different things are going to move around a tiny bit, but this is pretty close to what it's going to be for now on. 2 points in hull and shield healing, 2 points in hull and shield capacity, only 2 points in projectile damage, 2 points in APS flow, more of the help with getting stuff back to auxiliary and shields whenever I'm like moving back and forth between reverse and not. All 3 points in control stuff here, just the damaging part of the Drain X stuff, for also the resistance aspect to that. Full inaccuracy and defense, all 3 points in hull plating, 2 points in passive hull and shield regeneration, because that's really important for science captains, especially since you're going to be a sitting duck most of the time. 2 points in shield hardness, 3 points in crit severity, and only 2 in crit chance. As you'll see later on in this build, I'm already going to have an insane amount of critical chance right off the bat because of the R&D space trait. So it's really just crit severity that we're really trying to stack as much as possible for this ship. I have 1 point in power for additional oxygen shields. I have all 3 points in EPG. I have 0 points in long range sensors because as science tanks, it's basically just torpedoes and exotic abilities. And in both of those cases, you don't have diminishing damage for being farther away from your target. Same thing with regeneration as well. So you don't have any problems with like energy weapons dealing less damage because you're not going to basically have them on your ship. So you don't need to worry about this at all. And then a little bit of stuff here for scientific readiness and some stuff to deal with critical hits. When it comes to your points at the bottom, I recommend battery expertise because you're not going to have a hanger. You're already going to have a lot of holes from other stuff in your skills and things, so having just resistance to subsystem offline is really important, especially because for tanks, if your shields are offline, that's really, really bad. So you're going to have 4 things for science, because if you're a science tank, you're going to have most of your science stuff over here. Sector travel speed is just a preference. Either of these is fine. It doesn't matter inside of combat. Because you're not dealing with PvP, the stealth stuff doesn't matter. So going with max shield capacity and control resistance is pretty good. And I personally just go with drain resistance because a lot of my subsystems don't really matter. But having my shield up as much as possible is a bit more important to me. And then lastly, for the 2 points here for tactical, especially having threat control, because that's really, really important as a tank captain. And then having additional crit severity for my torpedoes. These are the 2 main ships that I'm going to be going over today. The builds are actually very, very similar, so I'm mainly just going to go over a lot of the weapons for basically both of them at the same time, and then I'll have like a slide each for like the individual bridge officer seating for the 2. And this is the stats whenever you look at them inside the game. As you can see, the builds are basically the same. I've got over 300 EPG and about 250 control expertise. It's not necessarily like the most oppressive build, but it is sufficient for tanking inside the game, and it does still do decent damage. And a lot of my test scenes and a lot of your DPS chaser type of maps, these boats consistently do over 50,000 damage per second. So it's they aren't bad ships, just that they aren't going to be like your record-breaking ships. Anyway, this is the space set that I use. I use the Lucari 4-piece set. Basically, nothing else just felt great, honestly, for a science tank. The deflector is super awesome for a 1-piece for science. You have a 50 scientific readiness right off the bat from whenever you upgrade this up to epic. Also has radiation damage resistance, which is pretty nice, and then a bunch of other defensive things here too. The impulse engines is nothing that's really fancy on it, to be honest. I mean, sure, if you get a lot of damage really quickly, then you get a lot of regeneration per second for 6 seconds afterwards. Cool, whatever. The 3-piece, if you have the shield, engines, and the deflector array, you have the regenerative shield overflow go from 2.5 kilometers to 5 kilometers. So the weird thing about this regenerative shield array is that basically the regular shield regen is basically cut in half, because the other half of your shield regen is an AoE shield regen to both you and to your allies to heal for a large amount of shield regeneration. And so if it goes from 2.5 to 5 kilometers, basically if you have allies inside of your command attract fire, then they're also going to get a lot of shield regeneration from your ship as well. So a lot of your allies that are a lot more offensive based and don't have a lot of regeneration, if for some reason they happen to get a tiny bit of threat for a little bit, well, they have a bunch of extra regeneration off of your ship to be able to help supplement some of the healing that they might need. And the 4-piece set really helps the warp core, and that really sets the deal as to why this thing is actually a pretty good set overall. So this is a warp core with a point jump ability. That's not unusual, but with this 4-piece set, that point jump gives you a lot of temporary hit points. Sets the cooldown to 2 minutes instead of 4, which is very good. Plus, it also reduces the shield hardness of enemies by 25%, which is a big deal. This is shield hardness, not shield resistance. This is pure good shield hardness. It makes your torpedoes and everything else hit much harder, much harder. So I really like this set a ton. Now for my forward weapons that I use for both of my ships, I use these 3 torpedoes mainly. Basically for all my science tanks, these 3 torpedoes are the ones that I'm going to be using. The gravimetric photon torpedo with torpedo spread does a lot of gravimetric rifts, which are like little tiny gravity wells. That does a lot of damage and a lot of pull with them all collectively. Neutronic has pretty good scaling with radiation and EPG as well, alongside that. And then the particle emission plasma torpedo launched after these guys, even though it's a really small kilometer for it to do its EPG damage, if they're stuck in a gravity well or in a gravimetric rift, they're going to be taking that full damage for that whole time. For my science cruisers that I typically use, I typically like to have a wide arc torpedo in the front and in the back. Of all the wide arc torpedoes in the game, the wide arc torpedo from the Gamma reputation is the one that I just like the most. It doesn't have the best firing speed, but alongside it just shooting, its proc slows enemies. So it is really nice. Well, it reduces flight speed and turn rate, which does help with threat generation as well, just as an FYI to y'all. Technically, if I was someone who microed a lot of my torpedoes and things, I could have put the CounterYolo missile launcher here. I'm just not good enough for that, so I just do torpedo spread whenever this thing's about to come up, and that's what I just do personally. For the rear ones, if you saw, there's two different builds that I had. One included an omnidirectional beam array, and one that didn't. For the one that didn't, I had the Terran Task Force Photon Torpedo. I technically could have added the energy weapon and the universal console to that ship, and it could have had some cool little synergies with the torpedoes on the ship. I just didn't feel it was actually needed personally. There's other things that I was prioritizing much more to help with turn rate and help with some extra passive survival stuff that I felt was a little bit more important. But definitely, if you're wanting to mirror my build and then make it your own, you can easily add the three piece of the Terran Task Force to the rear part of the ship. The Quantum Phase is a really nice one that has a really strong proc on taking out shields. The diffusive Tetrion is from Lobby, and I use this because this torpedo is a nice survival torpedo, and combined with that, the two-piece with the universal console gives me a lot of shield resistance and additional damage to all my other torpedoes. Not that these torpedoes are actually hurting that hard, but you know, it's something. And then for my other wide arc weapon in the back, I like to use the wide angle quantum torpedo launcher. This one is exclusive to Federation captains. Unfortunately, Klingon captains cannot get this, so you have to just use one of the other wide arc stuff available. I would recommend one of the missile launchers personally. The other wide arc torpedoes available in the game are complete garbage whenever you're trying to upgrade them. It's only if you're doing budget end and don't upgrade weapons at all would those ones actually be okay. But that's just my little tiny rant for that. When it comes to consoles themselves, these are ones that I use in the engineering slots. The DPRM console is extremely cheap for Romulan captains. Even though I don't have directed energy damage really being buffed on my ship, this does give damage resistance rating and a nice clicky, so that's nice. The Protomatter Field Projector is another really nice one. Even though this is my second account and it didn't have the Lucari ship unlocked, I got extremely lucky with Phoenix Lockbox the last time, and with even just like 40 lockboxes or 40 of the Phoenix lockboxes, I got 2 epics, two epic tokens and 3 ultra rares, and so with that I was able to get the Lucari ship and the Lucari console. And I was extremely lucky. Like I've gotten thousands of Phoenix lockboxes on my main account without a single epic drop. So it was astronomically insanely good luck for my second account to get what I was able to get. But yeah, this is the best tanking console in the game. So I'm glad to finally have this on here instead of shared process integration that I had on here previously. I also have Devil Tear Generator because that it's nice for damage and it's just fun to use as well. It has nice fun visuals. Because these guys are both cruisers. Having that connective RCS accelerator so that when my healings are going off, which is a lot, I also get additional turn rate, plus this has passive turn rate, and the one I got off the exchange was the cheapest one, which gave me control expertise, which for me as a tank, control expertise is perfectly fine to have too. For my science consoles, first off, I use the exact particle field exciter, the Control X version. It's typically one of the cheaper ones on the exchange. Plus, having more Control X draws more enemies into your gravity well. That with improved gravity will last a really long time. And so with my other science consoles off of the fleet, I use restorative particle focusers because I have so many hull and shield heals typically for my ships that are being used constantly. So that is pretty nice. On my Science Miracle Worker Cruiser, that 5th Science console, the Universal console, I just put in the Crimson Force Field there. I've talked about this before, but this, in my opinion, is the strongest tank killing console in the entire game. It stops regeneration, it stops projectile weapons, and reduces everything else that an enemy's trying to do by 50%. So that's pretty powerful. For my tactical consoles, these are the 3 that I typically use. The chronometric capacitor has additional torpedo damage and EPG, which is all pretty nice. The bias configuration modulator, these stats here don't really matter, but the 2-piece bonus gives me additional projectile damage and shield resistance, which is very, very powerful from a console. And then I have the Baron Gel Pack, which gives me a cooldown to bridge officer abilities, and also gives me additional radiation damage and a cooldown to the neutron torpedo. So I'll start with the Science Miracle Worker Cruiser first. As I mentioned earlier in this video, the Science Miracle Worker Cruiser is available to both KDF and Federation Radiation captains. It's just that it's a different look and slightly different stats. The stats actually favors the KDF version, but yeah, anyway. Based upon some of y'all's input about this, I decided to change this up slightly to have it be more universally favored for all matchups instead of just against the Borg like my previous one was. As thus, the all of these number ones here are pretty standard for a lot of different abilities in tactical engineering and science. I have a snapshot of these 2 specific things along with the things on my ship. For Null Pointer Flood 3 and Deployed Gravimetric Induction Platform 3. These are both pretty powerful. This is a AoE Confuse. Really, the biggest part here, even though it is a placate, the biggest thing that I use this thing for, because I wanted something that was a bit more universally good, is that this takes out projectiles coming at me. One of the biggest problems with science tanks that I was finding out in some of my recent, what are they called, random TFOs, was that there are a lot of enemies in the game which they're balanced, assuming that you have like beam fire will or cannon scatter volley going on all the time, and so if you're a torpedo captain, you don't have really a good counter against those types of enemies, unless you have something like Null Pointer Flood, in which you see that coming, you're like, all right, I blast this, all projectiles basically are going to get confused / they can't hurt me now, which is pretty nice. And so yeah, this is basically counter to those type of enemies inside the game. Alongside that, I still have Deployed Gravity Induction Platform 3 because it's a pretty nice pull alongside Gravity Well. Other than that, everything's pretty straightforward. This guy has barely manageable turning, so emergency power to engines is pretty nice. You don't technically need this. You could do emergency power to shields as well instead of this, and it would actually probably be okay if you specifically work around the traits that I've outlined in this video. For the support cruiser, we have a little bit of other different stuff too. And for our 2 special ones here, we have Timeline Collapse and Chronometric Inversion Field. The reason why I've said for a while that Science is the strongest class in the game for tanking is because Science has a special ability called Subnucleonic Beam, which for 30 seconds you reduce which you're able to reduce an enemy's damage by 75%, and their bridge dodge abilities are significantly slowed as well. So basically, it's harder for them to get off abilities quicker, and so you significantly reduce a lot of what they're trying to do. Now, in the temporal offer specialization, we have an ability called Chronometric Inversion Field, which does a lot of the exact same things, except instead of reducing bridge officer abilities, it's reducing flight speed and does more damage. That's basically the difference between these 2 guys. And so yeah, if you have a temporal operative starship, you can actually have some of the same type of things that makes science really, really strong inside the game. Combined with that, timeline collapse, just like the gravic induction platform from the last slide. This thing is another thing, kind of like gravity well. And it does damage. Nice also about this ship, so you're going to be able to have 2 torpedo spreads alongside the tactical team, so it is pretty nice to be able to have. My guidelines in general for science tanking is that science is the class that has the highest DPS and threat of any playstyle in the entire game, which is why you can tank fairly easily as a science tank. And reliability can get over 50 to 55,000 plus damage, and a lot of your DPS chaser maps inside the game against the board. Plus, with the traits I outlined in this video, you have basically 0 risk of dying at all, which is very, very nice. Unfortunately, it's very weak in PvP settings and in a battle of Kofura's elite mission inside the game. Science tanks just suck against tons and tons of mines, so you unfortunately can't do that mission with this type of build. But outside of those 2 scenarios, you can basically bring this ship into basically any advanced or elite mission, and you'll be just fine. You just have to charge in, launch all of your abilities, point jump if you need to, go in reverse, and just keep the enemies in front of you and keep on cycling through your abilities, and you'll be just fine. Whenever you're doing nonlinear progression, by the way, as well, your ship will start to glow like this in green. It's a really cool look in my opinion. But anyway, hopefully y'all enjoyed this video. And it'll probably take a couple weeks for me to go over my battle cloak tanking. And I'm sorry that I wasn't able to do this inside the game itself. There's a couple things I feel I needed to explain in a PowerPoint, and also, as I said before, I'm not really feeling the greatest today. So anyway, thank you all for watching, and enjoy the rest of your day.